Welcome to the Filmsteins, the double feature podcast. Join us as we unravel the interwoven experience of the continuous conversation of cinema. Take part in pairing movies with their cursed counterparts, movies that share DNA, or even pairing questionable duos by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Filmsteins. We offer tiers at the $1, $5, and $20 level, or the $5 tier will grant the ability to request films to further the discussion. So grab some popcorn, sit back, and get ready to join the 100-year conversation. This is the Filmsteins, where movies are more than just entertainment, they're an experience.
They're an experience.
And welcome back to another episode of the Filmsteins. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today I am joined by my X-rated friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
You can join us every Monday and Friday for brand new episodes of the Filmsteins on all of our free feeds. And every other Wednesday on patreon.com/Filmsteins for Patreon exclusive episodes. Some recent episodes include I Saw the TV Glow, The Watchers, A Quiet Place Day 1, Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds, and our recent Patreon exclusive episode of us ranking Tim Burton's films. Go find out which Tim Burton film doesn't suck. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe for $1. Come right in. Request a movie. Any movie. Go rate us on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys very much.
Are you stressed and filled with anxiety like I am? Maybe in a bit of pain from that car accident you had a few years ago? Well, the sponsor of today's episode, Hempville CBD, has us covered. They have the highest quality products created by chemists and doctors. Hempville carries everything from CBD to THC dispensary grade without those despicable dispensary prices. Order your Delta 8, 9 edibles and vapes along with the THCA flower and get free shipping when you spend $50 or more at hempvillecbd.com. Check out the link in the description for more details.
Today we will be discussing Ty West's 2022 film, X, for that X factor. I was going on and on about how Tim Burton's films are full of kiddie nonsense. This is to help balance that equation.
Two extremes here.
We get a little bit of a soft core meets a so-called slasher film, but that's sort of all slasher films, isn't it?
That's true.
I wanted to start off by saying, too, that I like this film very much, but I'm going to expose myself a little bit here. It's kind of a one-and-done movie, like a good one-night stand. I was pretty bored the second time I watched this film. I like the same things, but it's really not a movie to continue to unfold as time goes on. I've never heard it explicitly said, or even seen it in some kind of representative form, but the marriage of pornography and bloody slashers is a match made in heaven, obviously. Slashers are arguably softcore porn. They definitely tiptoe up to that line, some of them do. I really enjoy this thing coming through our character RJ about elevating the medium, whatever that is. It's funny that it is happening in an independent porno, and I'm sure it's always been true, but it's especially true now. We're seeing horror films trying to say something more in an explicit way, especially through pipelines like A24 and whatever. But I'm very curious how you feel about X. What do you think of this movie?
I liked X. I didn't love it, but it was still a very good film. This is a pretty morbid and melancholic film, and I didn't quite catch that the first time around. I felt like maybe it was one of those movies that you can get several things out of it, maybe different times you watch it, but maybe that's just me because you got bored the second time around. But I didn't quite feel like that. I felt like the first time I watched it, it definitely felt more sexual and more horror-esque with the gore, the blood, the killings. But this time around, I think I dove into some of the more complex themes, I guess, about wanting to live this American dream. And again, more of the morbid and melancholic process that comes with aging. But I actually saw more of the humor this time around than I did the first time around, which I was pleasantly surprised. Not to say that the first time around, all those things I got from it wasn't what the movie is about, but I guess I had to take a second to get past that soft porn movie.
Yeah, the X-rated nature is a little jarring if you're not expecting that, and if you're not familiar with the sibling-like nature of the two genres, I can see it being kind of just a lot, because the first half of the movie is the porno. We're making it happen. These are independent guys trying to make it big in this embryonic thing that's going to be explosive. They don't quite know how explosive it's going to be, but it's a time to make massive money. So it's an interesting focus.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also a noob when it comes to horror films. Maybe not now, but I feel like in a very short time, I watched as much horror as I could. But I didn't quite hit the slasher films like I have more the possession, demonic films. I feel like I'm missing a lot of those early slasher films.
You are, and that's partially because of me. I like the more demonic, occult type stuff. Slashers are sort of like the possession ones, where if you've seen one, you've seen them all. So they really just need to kind of scratch that itch in you to get any kind of mileage. But when you wrap your head around the similarities and the abundance of the slashers and the possession films too, you can start to appreciate things that are saying something, like Scream, for example. You don't need to see the lineage of Scream to appreciate Scream. They make it actually pretty clear in the movie that it's making fun of itself and everything that come before. And like I said at the very beginning, this one does something that goes so unspoken, but is so loud within the slasher horror genre with trying to balance this equation.
And I really like this focus on this like glaring juxtaposition of the lives of the free-spirited young people against the elderly couple. I loved it a lot. And very few films make you actually sympathize with the murderer / killer, which was indicative to me that this movie was on a whole nother level. I mean, this movie is super focused, and I'm not surprised because it was directed and written and edited by Ty West himself.
Yeah, it's something that's been cooking in his mind for a while.
Yes.
None of his other work is on this level, I will say, too. Cabin Fever, the VHS thing. I could see some VHS in this, especially in the kills, which I think is kind of funny because I think the horror elements of this film are probably the weakest parts, and especially the kills themselves, which I can't get over. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, I've never seen any of his previous work. I think I maybe watched VHS with my eyes half closed, half open, however you want to see that. But I felt like this movie had a really nice build up to the action. I had no idea where it was going to take us, and it was very well paced that I wasn't exhausted trying to find out what was going to happen to these people. So I was very surprised how much I liked it.
Yeah, I really appreciate the setup, the arguable temptation to want to kind of jump into killing and, kind of get the ball rolling. But there's this intense focus on the production of the porno. And we masterfully splice that with, especially when Mia Goth's character, Maxine, is in the house with the old woman. There's this back and forth of the porno scene and Maxine's conversation with the old woman kind of completing each other and each other's thoughts, which is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite sequences of the film. It's a perspective switch. We're switching from these two events going on. We're even switching the aspect ratio and the aesthetic of the film. One's pretending to film a film. I don't know how you say that, but the other one is very dark and gloomy, and it's pretty awesome. Because on one side we have Bobby Lynn and she's trying to seduce Jackson. And on the other side, we have Pearl eyeballing Maxine like she's trying to bait her. I mean, it's almost seducing as well. And it was so beautifully shot with the pouring of the lemonade and it like switching. And then I think at the end of it, Bobby Lynn says something like, hurry out before daddy gets home. And then we have Maxine on the other side, like trying to escape because daddy is coming home. Pearl's daddy, it's awesome.
It helps build this weird tension because unless you already know, at this point in the film, it's hard to gauge the degree of violence that's about to occur.
Not for you. I think the first time you saw it and that first shot with the cows, I believe you said, oh, this is about to get violent. This is going to be a violent film. I'm like, how did that? It's just a cow that got ran over. Like, how did you know that? Yeah, it's probably due to your slasher horror film knowledge. I don't have that built in me. And I saw someone commenting on YouTube saying the foreshadowing in this movie is just insane and they loved it. And I only saw the foreshadowing until the second time I watched it. Then at that point, am I really seeing the foreshadowing? I don't know, because I've already seen it the first time and I didn't see any of that the first time. So I don't know if I can call it foreshadowing.
No, it definitely is. You have to identify it to call it foreshadowing. And if it requires a second watch, that's just helping build that muscle because it's going to help you identify it in the future.
Yeah, some of us slow people out here need a second watch.
Yeah, a lot of the foreshadowing happens in the dialogue and how it's repeated throughout, especially with the religious guy on TV.
Yeah, because the only one I noticed the first time around was when Howard said that he had a weak heart. Like, oh, this man's about to die. Which I thought he was going to die when him and Pearl finally do the deed, but he didn't. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind. And then he dies because he got scared.
Which is hilarious in the landscape of a horror movie because the cliche form of trying to scare someone is you tease them, there's a relief because it's like a fake out, and then you get teased again, but you're a little like, nothing's going to happen subconsciously, and then you get got. And so that kind of thing happened with him literally getting scared and dying.
That's hilarious.
And of course, Jenna Ortega's character, Lorraine, getting shot in the face was hilarious too, right before that.
Oh, yeah. I thought she was going to make it. I thought half of these people were going to make it, I'm not going to lie, but...
Which I think is really special in this movie because one thing I do like about Ty West's approach to this is, which I can't quite tell if it's a lack of talent or masterfully kind of crafted, because it bridges into not being very good, but he seems to not care about the deaths. He glazes over them very quickly. There's not this real explicit kind of focus on them.
Except RJ's.
Except maybe RJ, but
that was...
But it's a little bit different because
yes.
There's almost this like challengers type thing where Pearl's getting her sexual release from committing the act, which is also a great marriage of themes because they are one and the same anyways.
That right there sums it up.
Yeah.
Visually.
Yeah, and speaking of the aspect ratio you mentioned earlier, we also see that composed in certain literal compositions with the barn and through some doors where we see this more square-like aspect ratio kind of splicing in the like movie world, TV world, screen world, and what's happening in the literal movie. Merging real life and cinematic life, which is super neat. I don't know how you feel about them. I don't know how anyone might feel about them because they're a little jarring, but a lot of this film is in funny ways. We see these really crazy cuts back and forth. It'll be half a second here, half a second here, half a second there, half a second here. The same frame, and then it'll stick with one. It's just a transition shot, kind of literally splicing the two scenarios. It's very cool, in context at least.
Yeah, I thought that played with the suspense and the teasing. Like, ooh, whose story am I going to finish for you?
Yeah, that works.
It's like, just pick one.
Good thought.
This film had the vibe of 2 M. Night Shyamalan's movies, Old and The Visit. More The Visit, because we literally have old people at night being creepy. But I'm really enjoying this genre of films. I don't know if this is a huge genre in the horror industry, this old people being creepy genre, but I really like it because it's so applicable to life. Part of why I can watch these demonic possession movies is because I have a harder time believing in possessions and demons and all these things. So there's a peace of mind that, is that actually going to happen to me? Probably not. So I can get through it. I can watch it. But there's certain films where I can't watch them because it could apply to my life and it could happen to me. Like, that's why I love the Saw films. The Saw films are bad people doing bad things and they're getting consequences. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to, sell insurance to people and charge them lots of dollars. Or spend more time with my lover than my kids. Like, those scenarios that are in Saw. But here, it's so creepy because this jealousy and this frustration that Pearl is feeling, it's so sad and it's so morbid and it's so scary because one of the biggest fears that people have is getting old. And not only getting old, but I think this is an important distinction, looking old.
And that's going to become more and more of a distinction too, as we are going to have the option to look old in the future while still becoming old. It's going to become a further and further distinction with one another. It's going to be very futuristic.
We're not too far from it because think about all these cosmetic procedures people are having. And okay, maybe that's not as popular, but all these filters on social media are crazy. I can make myself look like I'm 12.
And as the days roll by, there's maybe another scary reality where your digital life is more real life than your real life, at least in your mind.
That's very true. And then you have these filters that make you look like dogs, and now I don't even know what to say about that. Or poops.
Yeah, all the kinks are checked. We're good.
So we have this religious context in the background with the TV and these sermons that are being told through the TV to us. But I can't quite place what the purpose of that is, paired with, I'm assuming, something about the adult film industry.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not super familiar with the ins and outs of all the religiosities of Earth and Christianity. But I have heard on occasion the fastest way to hedonism is becoming a student of the Bible.
Really?
Yes, which is one thing I really enjoy here. And Ty West is very aware of that train of thought, that journey some people take. Of course, just like any other piece of art, you find different meanings in X, Y, and Z. It's why you see different denominations across Christianity and whatnot, right?
Yep.
It's obvious, but two people can read the same sentence, concept, and get two very different things out of it. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
We do that here. You get something out of a film that I did not. Got something else, right?
Yeah, one of the quotes I see online that I guess is just my go-to when someone says something like that about a dad and he's a drunk. So one of his kids says, I am a drunk because my dad was a drunk. And then his other kid says, I'm not a drunk because my dad was a drunk. So very similar situations, and it's up to you to decide what you want to get out of it.
And there also might be truth in both sides, which is some of the beauty and all of the complexity of trying to understand our nature and the world around us, right? In art. But that was another very familiar point with it being, anecdotal, maybe. But I've only ever heard the Christian to atheist route. For example, I've never heard the atheist to Christian route. In my experience, people abandon and oftentimes inherited ideology, which is maybe right along the lines of my dad's drunk, so I'm not, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And is validated through X, Y, and Z. It's fine. But the man in the TV, Maxine's embrace of God at the end is one thing that makes me excited for the future of this trilogy. Because one of my favorite things in storytelling is when an ideology can validate a decision, especially as something so ethereal and normally theoretically helpful and something that leads you to so-called just and good and piety. When Maxine is pursuing something that's frowned upon by a lot of people that are involved in godly ideals, while at the same time kind of challenging the very thought of rejecting something like pornography, when things like horror movies and how graphic they can be to the nth plus one degree, and they're much more accepted. Of course, they've gone through their trials and tribulations, just like Dungeons and Dragons and rock and roll, but hardcore nudity and sex seems to always kind of be pushed further and further back and not accepted as something that's just as fundamental as humans get. I think you especially see that in video games. How graphic are video games? How much gore and destruction is in a video game? Good luck finding nudity. Good luck finding any sexual scenes. It's just a strange double standard. Because I would argue the gore, which we see here in many, many, many horror movies, is much more graphic and obscene and arguably pornographic than what we call kind of porn. Seeing the insides of someone is much crazier than seeing people
get naked. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And you think we would have seen a shift in that with the rise of OnlyFans, but I think it's only gotten worse because I've seen so many stories of young women or old women, whatever, but of women losing their jobs or not being spoken to by their family because they have an OnlyFans page. Like these women that went to medical school or went to become a lawyer and have debt and they want to pay it off by creating these pages, and they successfully have, and they're making more money in their OnlyFans pages than they are with their degrees. And it's just crazy because someone's paying. Someone's giving these women money for that. So why are we all mad?
And then a lot of those same families who get pissed at their daughters and mothers doing these kinds of things, and fathers and sons too.
Yeah, everyone.
But they'll watch graphic horror films with blood and guts. Or, God forbid, pornography themselves. Maybe they came across them and they were like, oh no!
Click fast, click away. Or not click away. I don't know.
That's got to be a big fear for people who make adult films, right? Or a big anxiety. Like, oh man.
I hope no one...
Hope Uncle Frank doesn't... I know he's a freak. There's a funny marriage happening in X with certain ideas that I hope is explored a little bit more in a trilogy. Kind of like what we've talked about in the Spider-Man animated films that are happening right now. There's this baggage that is going to be kind of projected forward with Pearl and Maxine. And I hope there ends up being some kind of completeness to it all. But one thing I thought was really weird and cool in this movie, that Mia Goth played Maxine and Pearl.
I thought that watching the movie. There was a certain scene, and I don't remember anymore, but there was a certain scene, she said something and she looked a certain way that I was like, wait, is that Mia Goth? No way. But they made these old people look so nasty. I don't know why that was necessary. Because, like you said earlier on in the episode, we really missed here with the deaths and the gore and the blood. But I thought that very briefly, and then I was like, no way. It's gotta be somebody else. But then it was spoiled very fast. Of course, this movie's 2 years old now. Of course, this should be spoiled. And that was awesome.
It makes the whole conversation between Maxine and Pearl really weird. Because Pearl says something along the lines of, we are the same. Which is this obvious, explicit, maybe observation of that desire to be bigger than you are, to be known, to have some kind of legacy. But it's still especially weird because they are literally the same actor. So is there this weird transcendental meta commentary of what Pearl wanted to do and what Maxine is doing through pornography? I'm not sure. We'll have to see if Pearl answers some of our questions.
Yeah, we definitely will. And part of me took this as this older person wanting to be young again. And just this frustration she obviously feels with the world. She wants to hurt Maxine. She wants to put her down. Because jealousy tends to do that to people. You tend to tell them mean things.
Sure.
And that's very obvious at the end when she calls her a whore. She says, you whore, you'll never be anything, blah, blah, blah. Even to her death, she's still so caught up in this anger.
My mind also goes, here, listen. Mia Goth plays both these characters. Pearl is very into Maxine. It's like the old early 2000s adage of, would you have sex with your clone? And then they say, it's not gay, it's masturbation.
This was in the 2000s?
Probably before that. And we get these little moments where Pearl is violating Maxine.
Little moments. Those were disturbing moments.
And it just made me think, she is so obsessed with herself because she literally sees herself in Maxine because she is, they were the same. They are the same. So there's this literal feeling of nostalgia at play. And she's so into herself. Pearl is. She's so vain that when she gets defeated, she is self-destructive. And that's why she lashes out to Maxine. My mind goes to time travel type things because there's just this weird kind of transcended cinematic moment happening here that is dangerously close to breaking the fourth wall. And some of my wonders may be fleshed out a little bit more in Pearl and Maxine, we'll see, but we're left with that exact note of Maxine killing Pearl, leaving, and then we have to kind of sort out what we just watched. And then we have the cops try to wrap their heads around what just happened, and there's even a fun meta moment with them, like the sheriff guy, having no idea what could have possibly happened here.
How did you feel about our casting choices here?
When Brittany Snow sings, when she started singing, I started laughing. Because it just makes me think, we got the pitch perfect girl, we gotta have her sing. I'm not too familiar with any of these people, but I think great casting. And even better, like, costumes. Like having Wayne looking for RJ in his whitey tighties. Alright, I love it. And then when Jenna Ortega's character, Lorraine, wants to join in, she's wearing underwear that says, like, Friday or Saturday, has a day of the week on it. It's genius, because she's a child. What is she doing? She's not one of these girls,
You weren't surprised that we had Kid Cudi here?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind then. You're not surprised. But I thought these characters were fun. I thought the casting choices were weird, but it worked. And that might be just something that us, the audience, has to get over. As a hardcore Harry Potter fan, I can't get upset every time Daniel Radcliffe is not in a robe or shooting magic spells. Or when we put Ron Weasley in Knock at the Cabin. Like, what is he doing there? So it's unfortunate for the actors themselves getting typecasted sometimes like that. And I will have to do a better job. But yeah, that's who I see. Pitch Perfect girl. I see you girl. I see...
Yeah, it's even worse. It's character casting.
I thought the score was pretty good. And one thing about the score, or I don't even know if it's the score or if we just call it sound design, experimental sounds. I don't know what we call it here in this scenario. But we hear these moaning sounds, these like pleasure sounds, along with the score in the background. At times where, you know, we're having this parallel with horror and these adult films, but they made me laugh. They made me giggle. They were pretty good.
Yeah, the sound design was super tight. It reminded me of Mad Max and Furiosa, where we just have this super tight visual language mixed with this super tight sound and use of music. And I will say I really appreciate the commitment to the splicing of the two ideas in all of its forms. All right, man. Well, thank you for watching this movie with me and talking about it here today.
You're welcome.
Do you have a budget guess?
My budget guess is $30 million. I don't really know this dude's work. I know horror films, we tend to give them a little bit lower. It's an A24 film, but it looked good, so I'm thinking he has some money. I don't know. I have no idea. I'd be surprised if it's more than 30.
Well, it says here that it was $1 million.
$1 million?
This is going to be another example of how to spend money and how everyone is doing it wrong.
Holy shit. You might have outdone James Wan, Ty West.
Yeah, but not Ari Aster.
Or maybe even George Miller with that first one.
It went on to make $15.1 million. So not an awful lot of money, but compared to that budget...
That made bank.
This film probably did really well after the box office, too.
No one's going to go see this at the movie theater.
That's a good point. Porn theaters are a time of the past.
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean, time of the past?
I don't think they're as common as they used to be.
People used to go watch porn in movie theaters?
Yeah.
Together?
Yeah.
No way. All right.
Well over on Letterboxd with 1.28 million people. Lots of people. This was a critical darling. They weighed in at a 3.4. It's a pretty comfortable spot, I think.
Yeah, I'm giving this a 3.
And they gave War of the Worlds 3.3. I don't know how that works. At least they recognize that this movie's better, I suppose. But yeah, I think I'm giving it a 3 as well. I was battling a 2.5, 3 in my head, but you know, there's not a lot of character here, not a lot of dynamic. But isn't that just another recognition of the genre itself? You don't come for the plot. But yeah, man, thank you again for talking about this film here today. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Filmistines. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Monday and Friday with brand new episodes on all of the free feeds like Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Patreon, of course. And every other Wednesday for Patreon exclusive episodes. Come subscribe. Come right in. Join us next time for Ty West's other 2022 film, Pearl, the prequel, sequel to X. Remember, leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Come right in. Go rate us on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys very much. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Filmistines. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives on the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon, at patreon.com/filmistines. And follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is The Filmistines, signing off.